Hello and welcome to another episode of Impact Doc. This is a unique platform where we host bold leaders, impact makers, and social entrepreneurs who are dedicated to making the world a better place. As always, our goal is to help change makers recharge, restore, and reconnect. My name is Benita Izumezu, and I'm your host for today. Today's conversation is a very special one as we're diving deep into the heart of Nigeria's future. We often hear the Nigerians' large youth population is a ticking time bomb, but today on the doc, we want to reframe that. We're exploring the topic from ideas to action, how we accelerate youth agency and the power to build a new Nigeria. Joining me today is a leader who has traversed the world at the intersection of policy, energy, and civic reawakening, and is now at the forefront of the Nigerian Youth Futures Fund. Dr. Elizabeth, it's an absolute pleasure to have you join us at the Impact Doc podcast today.
Thank you so much, Benita. I feel honored to be here.
Thank you, ma. So, Dr. Elizabeth, tell us about you. Introduce yourself, your name, what you do, and what you currently do.
Okay. So, my full name, formal official name is Dr Elizabeth with an S, Agbiti-Douglas. I wear many hats. I'm a mother, I'm a friend, I'm a passionate advocate for social change. And at the moment, I'm privileged to be the director of the Nigeria Youth Futures Fund at Leap Africa.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Elizabeth. So you've had a very diverse career and you've chosen to settle in the social impact space. So tell us your social impact story. Why are you doing this and not something else? Was there a moment or a spark in your career that led you to focus primarily on youth-led social change?
That's a very thought-provoking, deep question. I would have to honestly say that I don't think there was one moment. I would say that everything about what I'm doing now resonates perfectly with the way I was raised, to view the world, to view my place in the world, right? I come from the Christian tradition and from a background that says that the reason any of us exist is to serve others, to make the world better. So that means that if people are hungry, and there are things we can do. Yes, you can provide food, but then you can also work harder to address the reasons why food is scarce and it's hard for people to access in the first place. Challenges around education, gender equality. We think about Nigeria, we think about the world. There are all these challenges. And I often tell people, especially for someone like me that comes from a Christian background, if Jesus were alive and walking on the earth with us today, I ask myself, what would he be doing? He would probably be identifying problems, trying to make people's lives better, challenging status quo, where it's necessary, and basically just doing good and trying to help people. And so for me, it just made sense that I was going to end up, I don't imagine I would have been happy doing anything else. So the work I do perfectly aligns with my values and my world system.
I like the idea of that we're all called to serve and also to provide solutions for problems and addressing problems. So, Dr. Elizabeth, one thing that fascinates me about you is your journey. And you have worked across seemingly different sectors like the agriculture, energy, migration, and the youth. Now, from your perspective, how do these sectors intersect, and how, when we're trying to build a sustainable future, do you think that there's a common thread with the youth agency?
Yes. The quick response to that is yes. So, think about our lives as people and as Nigerians. You wake up in the morning and, you ideally need food, right? Nutritious food. If you don't get that, it can affect your ability to be productive. It affects everything else. You buy food, but then you can't store it properly or process it properly if you don't have electricity. You go to school, even things like leaving the house and being neatly dressed. People who are in business know really well that, if there are challenges with power, telecoms, security, It's so all these things, speak to just the day-to-day life, living and trying to navigate and just have a regular day-to-day life. Then when you even think, because I have spent some time working in migration, when we even think about, I want to japa, I want to travel, traveling is not new. If you check the records, at any point in time, 7% of human beings are living somewhere that was not their place of origin. It's the story as old as time, right? If you check your Bible, the Bible is the story of migration.
Of course.
But then there are safe ways to do it. There are ways to do it that are, maybe I'll use this opportunity to educate folks. There is nothing legal or illegal about a person moving, right? In the sense that the ability to move is a basic human right. Right? Where you talk of legality and illegality is where you talk of things like trafficking of persons, smuggling of migrants, right? But people moving, traveling is not legal. You talk of regular or irregular migration, where your movement is properly documented and tracked versus it not being tracked, right? But I guess the long and short answer of this is all of this has to do with how, forget about social change. As a human being, just getting up and trying to face your day.
Yeah.
All these things, touch on our realities and the world as we face it. When you now think about it in terms of young people, for Nigeria, for Africa, for Nigeria in particular, you're talking of 60 to 70% of the population who have to navigate these realities. So, why would you be thinking about these things? If there are challenges, why would you be thinking about them? And you're not thinking about them in terms of how they affect the single largest group of Nigerians, right? And why are we also not asking ourselves, hang on, these guys may have ideas about how to solve this thing. And whatever decisions we make are ultimately, they are the ones who are going to have to live with it.
Right.
There's a concept of the 100-year moment, or rather the 200-year moment. Right now, there's somebody that is 100 years old. They can remember what the world has been like over the last 100 years. There were decisions made 100 years ago. Creation of countries, treaties that they have had to live with. At the same time, there are children who were just born today who may live up to 100 years. So whatever decisions we make now are also going to have implications for them. So that idea that everything you do is going to affect individuals who will live that long is something that I think is important, especially for all of us, but particularly for those of us who are in the space that to shape and decide high-level decisions for Nigerians.
So Dr. Elizabeth, let's talk about Nigerian Youth Futures Fund. So for someone hearing about Nigerian Youth Futures Fund for the first time, what is Nigerian Youth Future Funds? What do they do? And what kind of programs do they run? Just take us through a run-through.
Okay. So, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak about the fund. The Nigeria Youth Futures Fund, or NYFF as we fondly call it, is, as of July, it will be 5 years old. It was birthed just after the NSAS protests, and the shootings and the fallout of all of that in October 2020. And one of the things that those who, are passionate about youth leadership, Nigeria's future, identified was that, one, it wasn't wrong for young people to be clamoring and demanding for reforms and changes in the system. They live with it. They have to deal with it, right? However, there were gaps around the ability. Sometimes it was the ability in terms of knowledge, sometimes it was access, to those who they should have been sitting down. Sometimes it was the ability to organize themselves and be strategic. And in some instances, it was, the lack of resources, right, to be able to engage in these conversations in a way that, would lead to the outcomes that all of us were looking for. And so the Ford Foundation, MacArthur Foundation, and then later on in 2023, the Luminate Group brought together seed funding. And then we have Leap Africa, who are the ones implementing. So the Nigerian Youth Futures Fund, some people may be shocked to hear this, is actually not a government initiative. It's
wow.
a social change initiative.
Wow.
It's a non-governmental initiative that's implemented by Leap Africa with funding from these three groups. NYFF essentially exists to strengthen the youth ecosystem around leadership so that our young people can work to produce positive policy outcomes, right? We do that through capacity building, so there's trainings, access to knowledge, our grants, which is probably one of the most popular, offerings we have, where individuals, organizations that are youth-owned or youth-led or youth-focused, have access to funding. We particularly target the new entrants into the game. So it's not the guys who've been doing this for 10, 20 years. It's the younger, people who want to contribute to social change and who are just figuring, their way out. And then another key thing for us is also around movement building, particularly leveraging on digital technology, creative space, the spaces and the channels that feel comfortable to young people, not just in Nigeria, but across the continent. We have the campus debates, that have taken place pretty much every year since we started operating. That's it. Our work cuts across the country. So all our community, the Imaginative Futures Working Group, who sit down to envision Nigeria, who get involved in policy conversations, right, are drawn from across the country. Our grantees are drawn from across the country. And then we also work really hard to make sure that there's representation in terms of gender, rural communities, and then persons with disabilities. Those are really big ones for us as well. And then our support is available for a wide range of thematic areas and issues.
Wow, thank you so much. I like the fact that the fund is diverse for a wide range of groups, and the fact that it's for people that are just trying to do something, as long as there is the idea of trying to make change happen. To build on what you said, that it was seeded, the NYFF fund was seeded to support young people and as a way of civic reawakening from the NSAS protest. So now it's the idea that the fund is a 5-year plan.
Initially 5 years.
Initially 5 years. Okay, so initially 5 years. So looking through 2026 now, and then when you look back, what is the most surprising thing that the fund has seen so far? Or is there something different that wasn't fathomed into the fund at the inception of the fund?
In all honesty, I would say no. Me personally, I haven't seen anything that's shocking and surprising. When we started this, we had already, those who put this together had already realized and identified that you are trying to get young people who are just starting out, many of who are just starting out, the work to getting them to where they needed to be was going to take time, right? So some of the challenges we've had with individuals, organizations, having the structures in place were not unexpected. Finding challenges with groups that are typically excluded, also being slow to engage in the process, that's not been too surprising, right? It was something we anticipated.
Okay.
One other thing that I think was also not anticipated and was certainly built into what we call the theory of change was the fact that we expected young people to show up and show up powerfully. So again, for me, and I'll say this again, there was nothing that we've encountered that was a surprise. If anything, I think for me, the biggest and the best part of it was proof that faith in Nigeria's young people wasn't misplaced. So year on year, we're seeing young people show up, we're seeing them come up with great, amazing ideas, not just coming up with those ideas, actually executing them, right? We're having tools, we're having, in states, you're seeing young people be part of the budgetary process, you're seeing them pushing, and their states are now having, youth policies, have, in some instances, young people are the ones working and providing data that state governments, Ekiti state government, for instance, with the better government, tool, we're seeing improvements around the public healthcare system in Ekiti State, right? So, for what I'll say is there's no major surprise in that sense. We knew that it was going to be challenging because when you are bringing about social change, one of the first things, you are changing systems, you are changing mindsets. You have people who, even in this cycle will tell you are giving it to your friends and the people you know, right? And the truth of it is that that's not surprising. But for us at NYFF, that belief that, look, at the end of the day, if things are done properly, you will find young Nigerians who will do things properly and who will end up changing and saving us. And that's what we've been finding.
Yeah, I like the fact that the Nigerian Youth Futures Fund actually focuses on inclusive resourcing, right? And then capacity building and all. So now, when you look at it, how does the fund ensures that the money, it goes beyond just the money in the bank, and then actually build the long-term capacity of and resourcing of young civic leaders?
Excellent. So, if I get you right, now we're talking about stories of impact.
Yes.
And you're right, it's not just about counting numbers.
Yeah.
So, for instance, I'm proud to say that in the last 5 years, we supported, just in terms of grants alone, this year we'll make it over 500 individuals, organizations that have received grant funding. But you're right, it's not just about saying we've given capacity support to X number, to the tens of thousands, and grant support to the hundreds. For us at NYFF, what we do try to track is the impact, the so what, as you call it. So, for instance, one of the measures of success for us is you are a newbie, you are a first timer, you've probably never received grant funding before. After us providing you support, whether it's with capacity building, whether it's with capacity building in terms of trainings, or funding support, or supporting with movement building, have you been able to access funding or get partnerships from elsewhere within the ecosystem? So those are part of, because so I always tell everybody, as important as the work we do is, and this is not just limited to NYFF, we're not supposed to be the permanent fix. Right? The expectation isn't that you keep coming back to us for funding every year and capacity building every year. It's that what we're doing is providing seed funding. If we think about the work our young people do as social enterprises, we give you the initial startup, and then you take that, you capitalize, you maximize, and then you're able to grow from there. So for us, those are some of the things we look at. Part of things we're also looking at is, okay, the interventions that you do. And for us, this year 5, it's one of the key things we are trying to get answers to. All the stuff that you guys have done, have you grown as an individual, as a social enterprise? Is your community better? Are you guys healthier? Then even the big question, do people trust youth leadership more? Are they still going, young people, what do they know? Or are we able to see where people honestly say, look, we have young Nigerians that they are.
Dr. Elizabeth, let's stay on that, where you say, are people trusting young leaders enough? So let's build on that. So how is the fund actually helping young leaders transition from ideas to action?
Okay, so the answer to that question is in our approach.
Okay.
The reason why we support what we call the visioning process, we support young people to get involved in policy discussions with government, with other actors. So for instance, last year alone, NYFF supported young people in the Open Government Partnership, the preparation of Nigeria's 4th action plan. That's going to, for those who are not familiar with it, the Open Government Partnership, or OGP, is a global movement that Nigeria joined back in 2016. Started under former US President, championed by former US President Barack Obama, on the idea that citizens and government needed to work together and co-design. So governance is not bottom top bottom. It's together. Both co-designing, working together, right, and taking ownership of the governance process. We supported young Nigerians across the country to be part of the drafting of what will be Nigeria's 4th National Action Plan, guiding us from 2026 all the way to 2029, right? So we're proud of that. We've supported young people in the advocacy for a substantive youth policy. We've supported young people to be part of the NYSC reforms conversation.
Wow.
NYFF has supported young people to be part of even the constitutional reforms, the conversations that have been going on, the special seats bills.
Wow.
That's even just at national level. By the time you go to state governments, like I mentioned, you're seeing young people part of reforms around healthcare, peace during elections, state budgeting and planning for youth, for agriculture, just to name a few. Coming up with civic tech innovations that in it's Kaduna State, there are tools where you are able to see local governments budgeting and spending.
Wow.
And it's young people supported by NYFF who are able to, who've come up with this tool, and it's being used by their governments, by citizens, right? So then one of my favorite ones I get really excited about is Legis 360. So they had already started the work, but NYFF, and they've already opened up, they have a tool that allows you see the bills, how people vote, carry out analysis of bills, of acts passed at the National Assembly. Now they are taking that work to the state assemblies, and NYFF is supporting them to open up more state houses of assembly, right? So when we talk about NYFF supporting, and I'm glad you use that word supporting, the young people are the ones that have these ideas. We're not the ones telling them this is what you should do, this is what you should do. That drive is there, the ideas are already there, the expertise is there. They may just need access into certain rooms. They may just need funding to be able to actualize, get the ideas to exactly make them tangible products that can be used. And I mean, I will say it again, it's an honor and a privilege. I count it an honor and a privilege to be part of, supporting the next generation of Nigerians in, I'll keep saying it, saving us.
Wow, I mean, that is very inspiring to hear. And I think that's very great with the work that NYFF is doing. Looking at your journey and your career and how much you've been able to do all of this, was there or is there a moment that was really challenging for you in your leadership journey?
This is a deep question. So I won't give specifics, but what I will say I have personally found challenging or frustrating is how slow the pace of change can be. Social change isn't something that, I mean, if you're lucky and it happens overnight for you, it's not because it's only just because of what you've done. And again, maybe this is the benefit of where my own experience, and then I also tell people also studying the history, political history, the history of economic, social change helps. In 2015, under the Goodluck Jonathan administration, we had the VAP Act signed into law. We had 2 policies around migration and labor migration adopted by FEC. The work around that started more than a decade before that.
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to be part of the process.
Wow.
Right? And then I just left the UN system. And it was a year later when these 3 things finally got adopted. But like I said, you can imagine that I joined like maybe towards the end. And there are individuals who would have started the process, handed over to some other people. Exactly. So for me, that has been the challenge. For someone who, by nature, I want to do something now, see results now. The results chain is in stages. You have your immediate results, right? Your outputs. Then you have your outcomes, right? And then you now start talking about your impact and the higher level stuff where you can't always say, oh, it's necessarily because of only me, right? And the truth of it is that change takes time. Systems aren't built overnight, and they are not going to be dismantled and changed overnight. So I say that because as a Nigerian, you look at where we are when you consider many issues: the state of power, the state of inclusion. I won't lie to you, gender, our story around gender inclusion, particularly in governance, can be very, very heartbreaking. There was a time it looked like we were making progress, and then in the last, 10 years or so, it's like we've backslidden again. Oddly enough, young people's representation in governance is 2 times better than women's representation. Women are under 6%, and young people are almost 12%. In your National Assembly. So it can be quite frustrating. But again, like I said, for me, what I do is I take comfort in the fact that social change, there's never been a time when changing a society, changing culture, changing systems has happened overnight. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And what you do is, and forgive me, I'm going to quote scripture here. Paul will plant, Apollos will water, but it's God that will give the increase. Yeah. So when the change happens, if you are lucky, you'll be alive to see it, but you may not. But then again, they say, elders are supposed to plant trees that they may never get to sit under the shade of.
So let's talk about the grit in your work, where you've talked about systemic change and how slow it can be. And so now, when the needle seems to be, to move very slowly, particularly in a country as complex as Nigeria, so how do you keep your team members, motivated when systemic change that you're pushing for is moving really, really slowly?
So you'll recall one of the things I like to tell people about myself is I'm very, very big on evidence, right? Because if you work based on your feelings can, and anecdotes will tell you all sorts of stuff. Where I take comfort and where I try to inspire and help others is in 2 ways. Number one, the stories, right? So this is where I would tell people it's really important, not just, a lot of times you are sat behind your desk, you are drawing up frameworks, you are dealing with, names on documents. But then when you interact with the individuals that you are serving and who are impacted by the work you do, that can be a source of motivation, right? When you hear from them firsthand, this was where I was, and then thanks to the support I've gotten from you guys, even if it's one person, you've made a difference in the life of one person, one community. So that's one way I work to keep myself motivated and others motivated. Another way I do it is by looking at history. There's a quote that if you don't know your history, you get lost. Like I said, social change. There's never been a time in the history of human records where social change was ever a quick, fast thing. We haven't even suffered as much as some other people have suffered to get some of the freedoms and the progress that we now enjoy. That's the truth. Some of us have not been arrested yet for the work I do. There are people who've been arrested, there are people who've lost their lives, right? Who've been harmed. And then I there's a recent fact I came across, which was that for you to achieve meaningful, lasting social change, you only need about 3.3% of the population that are dedicated and committed to that change for it to take place. It's interesting because in medicine, for something to go viral, you need 5%. Even on social media, you need to hit that 5% mark for things to suddenly start going viral. For social change, the numbers are smaller. You don't need everybody. The critical mass is 3.3%. So that's comforting because you don't need everybody. You just need a small group of Nigerians who are committed, who are ready to walk the talk, and who, even if it takes them 20 years, or even if they pass on without seeing the results, are going to be diehard and committed. And so for me, that's where I take comfort. And that's where I also offer comfort and hope to others. What we're doing is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And sometimes you pass on the baton and you won't see the end of the race. But keep hope that if you're on the path of what is right, eventually, we will win at the end of the day.
Well, thank you so much. That was very interesting. Thank you. So, Dr. Elizabeth, you've spoken about how young people have to stay motivated and all of that. So, and for young innovators and leaders that are watching us right now, or that will get to watch this video, when you see grant applications, you review lots of grant applications every year. And knowing that there are lots of brilliant Nigerians out there with brilliant ideas, and that can be funded by, of course, the NYFF fund. So, but in a way, I think it's still a limited resourcing. So, and when you're reviewing all these grant applications and then the fund, what are the 3 things that makes a project actually remarkable? Something that you look at and you say, yes, this project is actually truly transformative and innovative, and it's not just good.
That's a great question, and it's one that the team and I sit down, and not just us, the advisory committee, we're sitting down and we're constantly asking ourselves and seeking answers to on a daily basis. What I will say though, and since you're asking me for like top 3 things, so I'll tell you some of the things that I look for and I encourage my team to look for. Number 1 is alignment. This one is like, it sounds basic, but you'll be shocked. Cycle on cycle, you put out a call, you put out criteria, you put out eligibility criteria, and yet we receive, applications. At our info sessions, you will hear folks, and I don't know, forgive me, I will say it's a Nigerian thing. There's a framework in place with clear criteria, and there's something within us that believes that, my case will be different. I don't know if it's our religious institutions that we blame for this. So the fund is very, very clear on, the criteria, your age criteria, the thematic areas, the things that we're looking for. And if you come and you pitch and you submit an application that does not align, NYFF is really is focused on strengthening civic engagement and governance, youth involvement in that. If your application does not align strongly, like we don't clearly see an alignment, that's already is a, we will carry your application and we will put it to one side. Because you've already, that's number 1. Number 2 is we look for quite a number of things, but one of the key things we look for is a clear statement and understanding of the problems and the issues. So it's not enough to come and tell me there's no light in my community. Yes, there's no power in your community, but that lack of power in your community, how is it affecting, you get what I mean? How does it affect your community? This is where you need to go beyond anecdotes and just, we need power. Heaven forgive me, because we claim our politicians do this all the time. They come and tell us, I'll give you good road, I'll give you schools. How? And for you to be able to tell us how, you need to be able to demonstrate an understanding of the system and where the gaps are. So one of the things we do look for is that you truly clearly understand the issues, particularly the context of the issues. So in Bayelsa, the situation around power and how it affects the communities in Bayelsa State will not be the same way it plays out in Benue State or Maiduguri or in Lagos.
Definitely.
So if you are pitching about Bayelsa, you need to be able to demonstrate that you know Bayelsa. Because if you don't know Bayelsa, how are you going to solve the problems there? We also look at, so I'm going to answer 3, then I'm going to throw in a bonus. We've talked about the problems. Then the solutions that you proffer, are they feasible? Are they actually fit to the problem and fit to the context? You get, there are ideas that you may come up with that will work in a Lagos, but that will not work in Delta State, or will not work in Abia State.
Sure.
So if your solutions must match and must be able to reasonably deliver the results to the problems that you want to address. I've mentioned
in that community.
Then last but not least is we're going to look at your financial planning. We're going to look at your budgeting. And let me expand that a bit to say we're going to look at the structures you have in place. So especially if you're an organization, if you're an individual, we're not expecting you to have an accounting team and all of that. You're an individual. But if you're an organization, there are certain things that are required for you to have a good governance structure. So that it's not one individual that carries money. Like you can account for every kobo that's spent, right? Which means that you need to have a proper structure around decision making, the management of your resources. The budget you present to us needs to show that you've really truly gone to do your homework, and that the money you are going to spend will be money well spent, right? I will even add and say that a lot of times in the development space, the bulk of the money is supposed to go to the people who are benefiting. It's supposed to go towards the work itself, not paying salaries, buying equipment. I mean, yes, some 10%, maybe 20% of it can go towards things like that. If you guys don't have tools, you can't work. But where the bulk of your money is going towards buying equipment, then where is the money that you're going to use for the actual engagements and the actual work
impact
itself? So I mean, you asked me for 3, but I've generously given Jara and extras. And like I said, if somebody really, really, truly understands this thing that they want to tackle, it comes across in the quality. I know that nowadays AI is there to help us, right? But the truth of it is, and this is, I'm telling folks, there are tools now that will allow us to know whether it's AI you used or not, right? And so yes, AI is meant to help you,
not to
but it's not supposed to take over your work.
Idea.
So we will be checking to see how much of you is in that application versus Claude or ChatGPT. NYFF fund say they want a proposal. Prepare a proposal for me, because that's the reality of the world we live in now.
Wow, thank you so much for the extra point that you added. Thank you for breaking it down and the expectation. I mean, that's very interesting to know. Okay, so as we look towards the future, and you've spoken about how NYFF seeks civic participation, youths, and then the genuinity in whatever idea, and then I see that NYFF speaks about reimagining Nigeria. So in your personal view, right, what are 3 non-negotiable pillars, that must be in place for Nigerian youth of 2030 to thrive?
That's a powerful question. Number 1, I would say, has to do with foundations. Foundations around learning, socialization. So here we think about schools. We think about our religious institutions, and everybody forgets, we think about the family unit and family structure. What are the values? We talk about imagining the future. The ability to imagine what Nigeria will look like is largely shaped by some of these institutions I've mentioned. The media, so the foundations have to be right. What that means is that we need to be thinking about our curricula. The curricula that we have in our learning institutions, are they fit for producing individuals who can think critically, who can problem solve, who are not boxing and saying, who aren't scared to take risks and innovate, right? So, and then there's also the element of values. Are we designing curricula? When I say curricula, there's the schools, there's our religious, there's all of us, right? The messaging, the learning that we're putting out there. When you talk of values, are we working to create a foundation, a social foundation where, you know, doing the right thing and not cutting corners.
Yeah.
Is not the first thing that comes to a Nigerian in any given situation.
Right.
We go run am. You get.
Yeah.
So that's number one. Number two, and sorry, before I finish number one, we also need to remember this even speaks to the quality of the people who are supposed to be doing the teaching. I'm talking about our schools. How well trained and qualified are our teachers? The learning environments in our schools, are they fit for 2026 and for the world that we say we want? So that's number one. Number one, I've spoken about foundations.
And then
number two, I will now speak about, you know, the social environments themselves. So yes, young people can be part of solving problems, but I'll put this again and throw it to my generation and our grandparents' generation. You can't be serious about talking about a Nigeria where young people can thrive, where the infrastructure is missing. There's a study by the Institute of Strategic Studies that says that for Nigeria, there are really only two sectors that if government not to get money and it wants to invest in, or it wants to get people to invest in to support, will transform everything for us. Power, electrify everywhere. Forget roads though, they're not talking roads, they're not talking power, and then communications. Communications meaning access to the internet, the ability to make phone calls. If individuals have access to stable, regular power supply, they can manufacture, they can innovate, and then if they have access to the internet, telecoms, you can communicate, you can learn, you can sit in your village, in a hut somewhere, right? And you are able to learn, access information that can help you solve problems on the ground, right? So now we're talking of the infrastructures before we even talk about road networks and all that stuff. So those are two things that, you know, if we say we want to build an environment that helps so that Nigeria young people can thrive, you know, for me that would be the second one that I would speak to. The third thing is around having a system where decision making is inclusive. As a country, we, when it comes to social inclusion, I mean, let's be honest with ourselves, there's quite a lot left to be desired. You talk of gender, where roughly 50% of, I mean, we heard what happened. Unfortunately, we had the situation in Ozoro over the weekend that has forced us to sit down again and think about ourselves as a country. Why in 2026 are we having festivals that tell 50% of your community don't come out? So they should not go to school. They should not go to farm. They should not go to market. They should not work. If you have nurses, you have doctors in that community and they are women, they should sit in the house. What if they are police officers? What does that mean? You're asking 50% of your productive workforce to sit in the house. And if they come out, I mean, whatever they see, they should take it in 2026. That's just on then before we start talking about decision making, we've talked about women's representation in politics. In private sector, we're actually not doing very badly, right? You are seeing women become MDs, CEOs, climbing the ranks in corporate organizations.
Yeah, so Dr. Elizabeth, I think I like the idea of gender, as in it interests me when you talk about gender. So from your expertise, considering your expertise in gender mainstreaming, how is NYFF actually specifically ensuring that young women aren't just, participants, but are leading in most critical areas and leadership journey?
Okay, so for us at NYFF, one big thing, and again, I'm glad you asked the question, because like I told you, every year, every time we sit down and we're constantly asking ourselves, how can we do better? So NYFF, just like much of Leap Africa is we're big on learning, right? Things can always be done better. But for us, one of the key things that we do is around the quotas. So for us, 50%, the target is 50% of all our beneficiaries reflecting Nigeria's demographic split along gender lines must be either male or female.
Females.
So there's the minimum 30%. You need at least a third of either gender. But for us, the target is 50%.
Wow.
And so if anybody pays attention, so some folks, when you see, young women are especially encouraged to apply, or where you see us really pushing, it's for that reason. I can tell you for free, interestingly enough, that, again, because of our socialization, you don't always find young women willing to push. In our university systems, it happened when I was in uni, and apparently it's still happening now, almost 30 years later, where as a young woman, if you want to run for student government, VP, maybe, you can deputize, you can handle welfare, but not to aspire to be secretary, to be treasurer, to be, before you talk of president, among the student body, they're already telling you, no, you be woman, right? Yeah. So you can now imagine that for many women, they've been socialized and told that, look, when they are saying leadership, you'll be the one in front, Congo, forget about it. So for us at NYFF, we are very, very key about saying, look, everybody is welcome. And in fact, for us, 50%, we want 50% of our beneficiaries to either be male or female. We do something similar with persons with disabilities. Nigeria's our population figures around that is 5%. There's a target, a minimum of 5% of our beneficiaries that are supposed to be, individuals living with disabilities. And that's aside from the fact that when we are also thinking about beneficiaries, we also think of geographic spread. So we want, equitable representation across the country as well. So for us, that's big. It's big for us in terms of having those numbers.
Well, thank you so much for that. Thank you. I'm always big on two things: gender and youths.
Oh, sorry. There's another thing I also forgot to mention. If anyone's also been paying attention year in, year out, social inclusion is a key, constant key thematic area, right?
Yeah.
Gender certainly is one of the more obvious ones. But then, we still have communities where albinism is an issue. So like we said, depending on the context and the realities where you are, even the gender we're talking about, there are communities where exclusion on the basis of gender plays out in the form of child marriage or FGM. There are certain communities where it's not as much of an issue, and the issues they are having maybe around women in leadership, right? So for us, it's a constant K. And this year too, if you check the list, it's probably, I can even tell you in terms of the applications we've received so far, it's still one of the big, important ones. So NYFF, aside from the targets, also, prioritizes work around, social inclusion.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. So gender, social inclusion, and now let's go to youths.
Yes.
I'm a youth myself, so that topic always interests me. So we often hear Nigerians' youth population is, as they call it, a ticking time bomb. So how does NYFF work actually reframe this into a demographic dividend? Okay,
so I'm glad you mentioned that, because the truth of it is, when you talk of a youthful population, it's like a double-edged sword. It's not inherently a ticking time bomb. It's only a ticking time bomb in systems that don't have proper structures, processes in place to harness and prepare and engage, its youthful population. For us at NYFF, to answer your question, a big part of what we do is we are working to ensure that young people are equipped, whether it's through knowledge, whether it's through connections with like minds, whether it's access to financial resources or other resources that mean that they can key into and be productive in not just identifying problems, but actually solving them, right? So for us at NYFF, I will beat my chest and say we have young people who are going around who in their day-to-day are examples, of, how do I put this, are examples of the best of us, right? So they are solving problems, they are engaging in their communities, and they are showing Nigerians, there's the stereotype of young people who are restive, they are rude, they are this, they are that. A particular generation seems to, be on the front lines of that. Meanwhile, I will tell folks that my experience has been that, just like with my generation and the generation before, you have both.
Yeah,
you can't say elders by default are saints. After all, the Nigeria that we have, it was older generations that handed them over to us. And we are dealing with the outcomes of the choices they have made. We have young people who, especially when their values are those that align with the greater good, those who are giving access to knowledge and education, resources, skills, are people of integrity who are getting stuff done. And unfortunately, as you always find in every society, there are young people who will be used. I will quote scripture again, forgive me. In every house, you have vessels for diverse purposes. Vessels unto honor, vessels unto dishonor. We have young Nigerians who are vessels unto honor.
Wow, thank you so much. That was a very interesting point that you made, that you put out there. And finally, Dr. Elizabeth, we've seen that despite the myriad of creative and innovative ideas by young people, but there's something that's an area of concern, which is that many young youth organizations fizzle out when funding stops. So what advice do you have for youth organizations on building sustainable structures that last? So I call this, tough love advice for young people.
Okay, I'm glad you framed it that way, because even if you didn't, I was going to give a bit of tough love. So the first thing is, yes, as young people, we're not going to deny this, access to resources. It's the same thing with women, with most excluded groups. Access to resources is, not as easy to come by. But they also need to maybe take comfort, and I say this a bit tongue in cheek, but I'm serious as well, that whatever challenges they are facing are faced by other more established organizations. There's constantly, how do I put it? There's constantly the resources are not infinite, right? Whether it's NYFF, whether it's other funds, and that's the interesting thing. There's actually an abundance of funding available. So that's one thing that I want them to know, that there are actually a lot of opportunities available. But now, coming and speaking specifically to sustainable funding, not just young people, but many non-governmental organizations and social enterprises are having to sit down and have these conversations. Certainly, not just because of last year with the US government's decision, but because globally, many governments, maybe many of the traditional donors are experiencing fatigue. They have challenges at home that they feel are better to deploy their resources towards, and you can't quibble or argue that with them. So one of the things as a community, not just in Nigeria, but across the globe, has been agreed upon is that, one, the idea that because what you are doing is providing social good, that it is social good does not mean that it shouldn't be assigned a commercial or monetary value. Yes. Wow. So that's number one. Okay. Your organization has value it provides to your community. You guys can do research. You guys can, I don't know if you get, you guys can, you can train, and you can do research. There's a wide range of things that you offer. As long as you're thinking of yourself as, I'm a non-profit, you are not sitting down and thinking about value, and you're not properly quantifying
the value.
Exactly. So you sit down and you're waiting for grants. And of course, there will always be grants. But the truth of it is that the thing that will keep you running and operating is your ability to say, okay, we have a workspace, we can rent it out. We have trainings that we do. this is how much it costs. And then somebody that wants to support, your philanthropists, your funders can say, okay, I will cover the cost of training for 100 people. But if you cannot quantify and say this is how much it costs to train one person, right? How do you do that? Then another thing again that, I would encourage organizations that it's not restricted to youth organizations, is there are opportunities depending on the kind of grants you get. And this is where that point I made about proper governance structures is helpful. If you have a proper governance structure in place, one of the people you will have is your finance person. A finance person is not an accountant. The accountant tracks your expenses, and you have your operations people. Your finance person looks at your organization's ability to generate revenue, to invest.
Wow.
Right? So your finance person is sitting down, and part of their job is, okay, we've received these funds. How do we maximize them? Which ones do we use for operations? How much do we set aside and invest? Right? Because those investments are the things, is the money that will allow you to keep yourselves open. And how can we raise revenue? So that's where, remember that point I made about when we look at applications, we're also looking, and part of the things we'll try and do is help you strengthen your governance structures. Because if you have somebody who's thinking like that on the team, then you are thinking about, okay, how do we keep raising funds so that we can keep doing what we're doing?
Wow. That is a very, very interesting point. The fact that it shouldn't always be not for profit. There should be some atom of social enterprise.
No, the truth of it is your organization is not making, how do I put it? The way
it's not making profit per se, but it's like a social enterprise.
What you need, yes. So social enterprises are non-profits, right?
Yeah.
But it's the mindset that needs to change. The fact that you are involved in providing social good, there's always traditionally been this idea of, okay, so folks donate. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you are able to show someone that their donation, is of value, and then if you are even able to take that, you guys will forgive me, I'm going to be doing a lot of scriptures quoting. The parable of the talents. The parable of the talents comes to mind here. There was the guy who had 1 talent, and he said, oh, I was afraid, so I went and buried it somewhere. And then there were the other guys who got 2 and 5 and said, we took it, we invested it, we traded it, and we doubled it. Yeah. And guess what? Those who got more, who had more, got more.
The one with nothing.
That's how this thing plays out. If you are able to properly, he who is faithful in little will be faithful in much.
Yes.
The crazy thing about it is, by building, working, and being fiscally responsible and financially responsible that way, you end up actually attracting more funding, more investment in the work that you do. Because folks know that they can trust you to manage those resources effectively and sustainably.
Thank you so much, Dr. Elizabeth, for sharing your deep insight, taking us through your journey and your experience through this conversation. It was an amazing conversation, and we see that from ideas to action isn't just a slogan. It's an actual necessity for national development. And to our audience and listeners, thank you for staying with us to the very end of this show. We hope that this conversation has been able to spark your interest and reconnect you to your purpose. If this conversation actually sparks your interest, don't sit on it, act on it. We'll see you in the next episode. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay updated on groundbreaking conversations and opportunities. I remain your host for today, Benita Izumezu, and it has been an amazing opportunity exploring the topic from ideas to action on this episode of the Impact Doc podcast. See you in the next episode. Till then, bye.